The sun hung low and mean over the horizon, painting the desert in shades of copper and rust. Clara May Thornton pulled her mare to a stop at the ridge overlooking Ember Hollow, her destination after 3 days of hard riding. Dust devils danced across the valley floor below, and somewhere a hawk cried out, the sound sharp and lonely in the vast silence. She was 26 years old, stood 5 feet 10 inches in her boots, and had the kind of auburn hair that caught fire in the afternoon light. Her hands, wrapped in worn leather gloves, gripped the reins with the steady confidence of someone who'd been riding since before she could properly walk. The telegram announcing her Aunt Millicent's passing had reached her in Denver 2 weeks ago. Now here she was, heir to a tailoring shop in a town she'd never seen, with nothing but 2 saddlebags, a trunk strapped to a pack mule, and a determination as hard as the rocky ground beneath her horse's hooves. The descent into Ember Hollow took another hour. By the time Clara reached the main street, shadows stretched long between the buildings, and the air had taken on that peculiar desert chill that came with sunset. The town was smaller than she'd imagined, a single dusty thoroughfare lined with weathered storefronts, their signs creaking in the evening breeze. The dusty boot saloon anchored one end of the street, its bat-wing doors still and silent. At the other end stood a modest church, its white paint peeling like sunburned skin. Clara counted maybe 24 buildings in all. The Mercantile, a hotel that had seen better days, the sheriff's office with its single-barred window, a livery stable where a boy no more than 14 was brushing down a gray gelding, and there, squeezed between the barber shop and what looked like a small bank, was the shop that had brought her here, Thornton's Tailoring and Mending, painted in faded gold letters on a window thick with dust. She dismounted in front of the shop, her muscles protesting after the long ride. The key was where the lawyer's letter had said it would be, under a loose board beneath the front step. Clara turned it in the lock, and the door opened with a groan that seemed to echo down the empty street. Inside, the air was stale and heavy with disuse. Bolts of fabric lined one wall, their colors muted beneath a film of dust. A cutting table dominated the center of the room, and in the corner sat her aunt's pride and joy, a Singer sewing machine, its black metal body still gleaming despite the neglect. Clara ran her fingers over its smooth surface, remembering the letters Millicent had written about this machine, how she'd saved for 2 years to have it shipped from back east. You Millicent's kin. Clara turned to find a woman standing in the doorway. Silhouetted against the fading light, she was perhaps 50, with steel-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. I'm Clara Thornton, her niece. The woman stepped inside, her boots clicking on the wooden floor. Martha Hendricks, I run the boarding house next door. She looked Clara up and down with the frank assessment of someone who'd learned to judge character quickly. Tall one, aren't you? Mill always said you took after your father's side. She mentioned you in her letters, Clara said. Said you were one of the few friends she had here. Martha's face softened slightly. Your aunt was a good woman, kept to herself mostly, but honest as the day is long. Shame what happened. The lawyer said it was her heart. That's what Doc Morrison called it. Found her right there, slumped over that machine. Still had a half-finished vest in her hands. Martha paused, studying Clara's face. You planning to stay? I am. Something shifted in Martha's expression, surprise, perhaps, or respect. Well then, you'll be needing supplies. Mercantile opens at 7. Jake Morrison, that's the doc's son, he runs it fair. Don't let him overcharge you, though. Boy's got a tendency to add a pretty woman tax to his prices. Clara's jaw tightened. I can handle myself. I expect you can. Martha moved toward the door, then turned back. Word of advice, this ain't Denver or wherever you've come from. Ember Hollow's got its ways, and they're set hard as adobe. A woman alone, especially one who looks like you. She let the words hang. Just be careful is all. After Martha left, Clara stood alone in the gathering darkness. She lit the oil lamp she found on the counter, its warm glow pushing back the shadows but not the weight of Martha's warning. Through the window, she could see men beginning to gather outside the saloon, their laughter carrying on the night air. Somewhere, a dog barked, and closer, she could hear the steady rhythm of a hammer on metal from the blacksmith's shop. Clara unpacked slowly, methodically. Her few dresses went into the wardrobe in the small living quarters behind the shop. Her mother's Bible found its place on the nightstand. The photograph of her parents taken just months before the fever claimed them, she propped carefully on the mantel above the small fireplace. She found her aunt's ledger in the top drawer of the desk. The entries neat and precise right up until 3 weeks ago. The last entry was for a shirt, paid in full by someone named L. Granger. Clara ran her finger over the name, wondering about the people who had sat in this shop, who had trusted her aunt with their clothing, their appearance, their dignity in this hard place. The mule and mare needed tending. Clara made her way to the livery stable, where the boy she'd seen earlier was closing up for the night. "Help you, ma'am." His voice cracked on the last word, caught between youth and manhood. "I need to stable these two. I'm Clara Thornton. I've taken over my aunt's shop." The boy's eyes widened slightly. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Tom Paulson. I'm real sorry about Miss Millicent. She was always kind to me." He took the reins, handling the animals with practiced ease. $1 a week for both, including feed. Grooming's extra. Clara paid for 2 weeks in advance, noting how Tom carefully counted the coins before pocketing them. As she walked back to the shop, she noticed how the few people still on the street watched her pass, some with curiosity, others with something harder to name. Back in the shop, she heated water on the small stove and washed the trail dust from her face and hands. In the mirror above the washstand, she studied her reflection. Martha had been right, she didn't look like she belonged here. Her cheekbones were too sharp, her bearing too upright, her height too commanding. In Denver, she'd been just another face in the crowd. Here, she stood out like a cardinal among sparrows. But belonging had never been Clara's strong suit anyway. After her parents died, she'd lived with 3 different relatives before landing with Millicent at 15. Each house had made it clear she was a burden. Too tall, too independent, too much trouble. Only Millicent had seen something else in her, had taught her to sew, to create beauty with her hands, to stand straight despite the weight the world tried to place on her shoulders. Now Millicent was gone, and Clara was alone again. But this time, she had a trade, a shop, and a chance to build something of her own. She spent the rest of the evening cleaning, attacking the dust with a vengeance that would have made her aunt proud. By the time exhaustion finally claimed her, the front room sparkled in the lamplight, the fabrics freed from their dusty shrouds, the sewing machine oiled and ready. Clara made a simple supper of hardtack and dried beef from her travel supplies, promising herself a proper visit to the mercantile in the morning. As she prepared for bed, the sounds of Ember Hollow at night drifted through the thin walls, laughter from the saloon, the clip-clop of horses, a woman's voice raised in song, quickly hushed. She lay in the narrow bed that had been her aunt's, staring at the ceiling beams in the darkness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new faces, new tests of her resolve. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, she had a roof over her head that belonged to her, a purpose waiting with the sunrise. Just before sleep took her, Clara heard footsteps pause outside her door. They lingered for a moment, long enough for her hand to find the Colt .32 she kept beneath her pillow, then moved on. She relaxed her grip but kept the weapon close. Martha's warning echoed in her mind. "This ain't Denver." No, Clara thought, it certainly wasn't. But she'd survived worse than suspicious looks and small-town gossip. She'd survived loss and loneliness and the peculiar cruelty that the world reserved for women who didn't fit its narrow expectations. Ember Hollow didn't know it yet, but Clara May Thornton hadn't come here to shrink herself to fit their mold. She'd come to build a life, one careful stitch at a time. The desert wind picked up outside, rattling the windows and sending tumbleweeds racing down the empty street like restless ghosts. But inside the little shop, Clara slept deep and dreamless, her hands finally still after days of traveling, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. The morning sun was barely a suggestion on the horizon when Clara stepped out of her shop, list in hand. The mercantile wouldn't open for another hour, but she wanted to be first through the door. 3 days of trail food had left her craving real coffee and fresh bread, and her fabric inventory needed replenishing if she hoped to attract customers. Main Street looked different in the early morning light, softer somehow, the harsh edges blurred by long shadows. A few early risers moved about their business, a man loading grain sacks onto a wagon, a woman sweeping the boardwalk in front of the hotel. Clara nodded to each, receiving curious stares in return. She used the time to walk the length of the street, familiarizing herself with her new home. The buildings told their own stories, some well-maintained with fresh paint and sturdy signs, others bearing the scars of neglect. The Saloon, she noticed, was among the finest structures in town, its windows actual glass instead of oiled paper, its facade adorned with carved wooden pillars. At precisely 7 o'clock, Jake Morrison flipped the sign on the mercantile door. He was younger than Clara had expected, perhaps 25, with sandy hair that flopped over his forehead and the eager smile of someone trying too hard. "Well now, you must be Miss Thornton," he said, holding the door wide. "Whole town's been buzzing about Millicent's niece coming to take over. Said you were a handsome woman, but they didn't do you justice." Clara stepped past him without acknowledging the compliment. The store's interior was well stocked, shelves lined with everything from canned goods to ammunition. She pulled out her list and began selecting items, aware of Jake following close behind. "Coffee, sugar, flour, salt pork," she read aloud, moving efficiently through the aisles. "Let me help you with that," Jake offered, reaching for a sack of flour at the same moment Clara did. Their hands touched briefly, and he let his linger. Clara pulled back sharply. "I can manage." "Course you can, just trying to be neighborly." His smile never wavered, but something shifted in his eyes. "You know, a woman like you, new in town, might need someone to show her around. I close up at 6 most evenings." "Mr. Morrison." Clara turned to face him fully, using every inch of her height. "I need supplies, not a tour guide. Now, if you could point me toward your fabric selection." He gestured toward the back corner, his expression cooling. "Not much there, I'm afraid. Most folks order from the catalog or make the trip to Cedar Ridge for anything fancy." Clara examined the meager selection, a few bolts of practical cotton, some wool that had seen better days. Nothing suitable for the kind of work she intended to do. She selected what was usable and returned to the counter where Jake was tallying her purchases. "That'll be $12.40. Clara had kept careful track. The total should have been no more than $9. "Perhaps you could show me your arithmetic," she said evenly. Jake's face flushed. "Prices have gone up, supply and demand." "I see. And did they go up this morning, or just for me?" Before Jake could answer, the door chimed. A man entered, bringing with him the smell of leather and tobacco. Clara glanced over to see a cowboy pausing just inside the threshold, his hat in his hand. He was perhaps 30, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of winter sky. Dust covered his clothes, suggesting he'd ridden through the night. "Morrison," the cowboy said with a nod. Then his gaze found Clara. Something flickered across his face, not the usual assessment she was used to, but something more like recognition, though she was certain they'd never met. "Granger," Jake replied, his tone noticeably less friendly. "You're in town early." "Had business at the bank." The man moved to the far side of the store, but Clara could feel his attention even as he studied a display of bridles. Jake cleared his throat. "About those prices, Miss Thornton." The lady's right. The cowboy's voice was quiet, but carried clearly across the store. Unless coffee went up to $2 a pound overnight, you're overcharging her by about $3. Jake's face went from red to purple. Don't recall asking your opinion, Granger. Don't recall needing permission to give it. He selected a bridle and approached the counter, moving with the easy grace of someone comfortable in his own skin. Up close, Clara could see the fine lines around his eyes, the kind that came from squinting into too many suns. I'll take this, he said to Jake, then turned to Clara. Lucas Granger, ma'am. You'd be Millicent's niece. Clara Thornton. She found herself studying his face, trying to place what seemed familiar about it. Then she remembered the ledger. L. Granger, the last name in her aunt's book. Your aunt was a fine woman. Sorry for your loss. He paused, then added, That's $9.40 Morrison owes you. The lady can do her own arithmetic. Jake slammed Clara's purchases into a box with unnecessary force. $9.40 then, he muttered. Clara paid without comment, but as she lifted the heavy box, she heard commotion from the street. Through the window, she could see a crowd gathering near the saloon. A woman emerged from the batwing doors young, pretty despite the hard paint on her face, wearing a dress that left little to imagination. She was arguing with a man who kept grabbing at her arm. That's Belle, Jake said, his earlier irritation replaced by salacious interest. One of Big Mike's new girls, arrived on yesterday's stage. Clara watched as Belle wrenched free and hurried down the boardwalk, the man following. The crowd dispersed. Their morning entertainment concluded, but Clara noticed how the woman walked shoulders hunched, arms wrapped around herself despite the warming day. Quite a spectacle. Jake continued, though I hear Big Mike's expecting another girl soon. Taller one, red hair, should be arriving any day now. It took Clara a moment to understand his implication. When she did, ice formed in her chest. Excuse me? Oh, nothing certain, Jake said with false innocence. Just what I heard. You know how people talk. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks, so this was how it would be innuendo and assumption, her height and unmarried status making her suspect before she'd even opened her shop. She lifted the box, prepared to leave without another word, when Lucas Granger spoke again. That ain't the girl you think she is, Morrison. His tone was conversational, but something in it made Jake step back. This is Miss Thornton, the seamstress, the one who's going to be altering your Sunday suit when you split the seat again from eating too much of your mama's pie. A nervous laugh escaped Jake. Just making conversation. Granger, no offense meant. None taken, Clara said coldly, though she filled the words with enough frost to say otherwise. Outside? She paused to shift the box's weight, angry at herself for the tremor in her hands. She'd known this wouldn't be easy, but to be mistaken for, compared to, let me... Lucas Granger appeared at her elbow, reaching for the box. Clara's first instinct was to refuse, but the genuine offer in his eyes made her reconsider. She let him take it. They walked in silence for a moment before he spoke. Morrison's a fool, but he's not the only one who'll make assumptions. Town like this, people got nothing better to do than gossip. I'm aware. I expect you are. They reached her shop, and he waited while she unlocked the door. Inside, he set the box on the counter and turned to leave, then paused. Your aunt never let their talk bother her. Just went about her business, did good work, and eventually they found other things to whisper about. How long did that take? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. About 10 years. Despite herself, Clara laughed a short, surprised sound. Wonderful. Could be faster for you. Millicent was private to a fault. Wouldn't hardly speak to anyone unless it was about hemlines or buttonholes. He settled his hat back on his head. You don't strike me as the silent type. What type do I strike you as? He considered this, and Clara found herself genuinely curious about his answer. The type that's got Morrison rechecking his arithmetic for the next month. After he left, Clara stood in her shop trying to make sense of the morning. The encounter at the mercantile had shaken her more than she cared to admit. She'd faced judgment before, but something about the casual cruelty of Jake's insinuation, the way he'd tried to put her in a box before she'd even had a chance to prove herself, made her stomach turn. She thought of Belle, the saloon girl, hunched and hurrying away from unwanted attention. How easy it would be for the town to paint Clara with the same brush, to see only a tall, unmarried woman and draw their own conclusions. But Lucas Granger hadn't. He'd seen Jake's game and called it out, defended her without making her feel weak for needing defense. She found herself thinking of his eyes, that winter sky blue, and how they'd held steady on hers without the usual heat or dismissal she was used to from men. Clara shook her head and began unpacking her supplies. She had work to do, a business to build. She couldn't afford to be distracted by kindness from strangers, no matter how unexpected. The day stretched ahead, full of tasks. But as she set water to boil for coffee, Clara found herself glancing at the ledger, at that final entry in her aunt's careful hand. L. Granger, a shirt, paid in full. Through the window, she could see the town coming, fully alive wagons rolling down Main Street, women with baskets heading to market, men gathering to smoke and gossip outside the barber shop. Ember Hollow was showing its true face now, and Clara knew she had two choices: shrink to fit their expectations, or stand tall and make them adjust their vision. She thought of Lucas Granger's quiet defense, of her aunt working silently for 10 years until the whispers died, of Belle the saloon girl just trying to survive in a world that saw her as commodity rather than person. Clara poured her coffee strong and black, then opened her shop door wide. Let them look. Let them whisper. She had work to do. The first week passed in a blur of cleaning, organizing, and waiting. Clara had polished every surface until it gleamed, arranged and rearranged the fabric display, and mended every sample piece she could find to showcase her skill. Yet customers remained elusive as morning mist. She'd see them sometimes, peering through her window, women with baskets on their arms, studying her work with interested eyes. But they'd move on without entering, as if an invisible barrier held them back. Clara understood. In a town like Ember Hollow, being first through a new door carried risk. Better to wait and see what others said. On the 8th day, just as Clara was considering whether her meager savings could sustain another week of empty hours, the bell above her door chimed. A small woman entered, moving with the careful dignity of someone who'd learned to command respect through precision rather than presence. Miss Thornton. The woman's voice was cultured, unexpected in this rough town. I'm Mrs. Eleanor Hartley. Clara recognized the name, the preacher's wife. She'd seen her at a distance, always impeccably dressed despite the dust and heat. Mrs. Hartley, how may I help you? Eleanor Hartley moved through the shop with assessing eyes, examining the samples Clara had displayed. She fingered a delicate piece of embroidery, studied the even stitches on a mended shirt, ran her hand over a bolt of navy wool. Your aunt made all my clothes, she said finally. I was heartsick when she passed. Been making do with what I have, but... She gestured to her dress, and Clara could see where the hem had been let down multiple times, the fabric wearing thin at the seams. I'd be honored to help, Clara said carefully, sensing this was about more than just clothing. Mrs. Hartley turned to face her fully. I'll be frank, Miss Thornton, there's been talk. Some say you're too young, too... She paused, choosing her words. Too worldly for a town like ours. But I knew your aunt for 15 years. Millicent Thornton never recommended anyone lightly. She spoke of you in her letters to me. She did. Said you had the finest hand with a needle she'd ever seen. Said you could make a flour sack look like silk if you set your mind to it. Eleanor's stern expression softened slightly. I need a complete wardrobe. 4 day dresses. 2 for Sundays. A winter coat and whatever underthings are proper. I'll pay fair wages and expect fine work. Do well by me, and others will follow." Clara's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "When would you like to start?" "Now, if you're able. My husband has been asked to speak at the Territorial Assembly next month. I won't have anyone saying the preacher's wife from Ember Hollow looks shabby." For the next 2 hours, Clara took measurements, discussed fabrics, and sketched designs. Eleanor Hartley proved to have sophisticated tastes hidden beneath her modest demeanor. She knew quality, understood cut and construction, and wasn't afraid to ask for what she wanted. "This blue," she said, holding up a bolt of midnight silk Clara had bought from her own savings. "For the assembly dinner, can you do something that won't look out of place in Denver but won't scandalize Ember Hollow?" "I have just the design," Clara said, already envisioning the dress. High neck, long sleeves, but with a shaped waist and subtle train, elegant without being ostentatious. "Perfect." Eleanor counted out a deposit that would keep Clara's shop open for another month. "I'll need the first day dress by Sunday. Can you manage?" "Certainly." After Eleanor left, Clara sat at her cutting table, hands trembling with relief and excitement. One customer, one chance to prove herself. She couldn't afford to waste it. Word of Eleanor Hartley's commission spread faster than wildfire in drought season. By afternoon, Clara had 3 women hovering outside her door, pretending to study the window display while stealing glances inside. She ignored them, focusing on cutting the pattern for Eleanor's first dress. The next morning brought her second customer, Sarah Paulson, the livery owner's wife and mother to young Tom. She was a practical woman with work-worn hands and a direct manner. "Tom says you've been kind to him," she said without preamble. "Boy's not used to that from town folk. His clothes are more patches than original cloth. Can you make him something that'll hold up to work, but won't mark him as poor?" Clara thought of the boy, caught between childhood and manhood, trying so hard to be responsible. "I can do that. Something sturdy but well cut. He's growing fast, so I'll leave extra seam allowance." Sarah's relief was palpable. "His PA died 2 years back. I do what I can, but—" She straightened her shoulders. "What'll it cost?" Clara named a price that was fair but lower than she'd charge others. Sarah noticed. "I don't need charity, Miss Thornton." "It's not charity. Tom's been helpful with my horses. Consider it a fair trade." Sarah studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, then." As the days passed, more women found their courage. The mayor's wife needed a riding habit. The school teacher wanted her Sunday dress altered. Even some of the farming wives from outside town began making the trip in. But with acceptance came scrutiny. Clara felt the eyes on her constantly watching how she walked, how she dressed, who she spoke to. The men were the worst, lounging outside the saloon or the barber shop, making comments just loud enough for her to hear. "Too proud by half," one said as she passed. "Bet I could bring her down a notch or two," another added, earning rough laughter from his companions. Clara kept her spine straight and her eyes forward, but their words burrowed under her skin like thorns. At night, alone in her shop, she'd sometimes catch herself hunching her shoulders, trying to make herself smaller. It was during one of these evening moments, bent over Eleanor's blue silk with only an oil lamp for company, that she heard the commotion outside. Shouts, the sound of breaking glass, a woman's scream. Clara grabbed her aunt's heavy scissors and crept to the window. A fight had spilled out of the saloon, 2 men trading blows while a crowd cheered them on. In the chaos, she saw Belle, the saloon girl from her first week, pressed against the wall, a man looming over her. Without thinking, Clara threw open her door. "Hey!" she shouted. "Leave her be!" The man turned, whiskey-red face split in an ugly grin. "Well, well, the tall drink of water wants to play too." "I said leave her be." Clara stepped onto the boardwalk, scissors hidden in the folds of her skirt. The man took a step toward her. or what you'll hem me to death." The crowd's attention shifted from the fight to this new entertainment. Clara felt exposed, vulnerable, but she held her ground. Behind the man, she saw Belle trying to slip away. "Or I'll explain to your wife why her husband's bothering women outside the saloon," Clara said, recognizing him now, Frank Dobson, who ran the feed store. "Wasn't she asking about a new church dress just yesterday?" Frank's face went from red to white. The crowd laughed, but it was different now, amused rather than cruel. He muttered something crude and stumbled back toward the saloon. "Show's over," a familiar voice said, and Clara turned to see Lucas Granger moving through the crowd. He wasn't looking at her, but at the men still lingering. Something in his expression made them disperse. Belle had disappeared, and Clara found herself alone on the boardwalk with Lucas. She realized she was shaking. "You all right?" he asked quietly. "Fine." The word came out sharper than intended. He studied her for a moment. "That was brave. Foolish, but brave. Someone had to—" "I know." He touched the brim of his hat. "Just, maybe next time use something better than scissors." Clara looked down, realizing she'd brought her aunt's sewing scissors into plain view. A laugh bubbled up, slightly hysterical. "They're very sharp scissors." That ghost of a smile appeared again. "I'm sure they are." He started to leave, then turned back. "Frank Dobson's mean when he's drunk, but he's a coward when sober. He won't bother you." "And if he does?" Lucas met her eyes. "Then he'll answer to me." The simple statement hung in the air between them. Clara wanted to protest that she could handle herself, but something in his expression stopped her. This wasn't about thinking her weak. This was about what protection, respect? Before she could puzzle it out, he was gone, walking down the dark street with that easy stride. Clara stood on her boardwalk a moment longer, feeling the night air cool against her heated face. Back inside, she tried to return to her sewing, but her hands wouldn't steady. The confrontation had shaken something loose inside her. Not fear, exactly, but an awareness of how precarious her position was. One wrong step, one misunderstood moment, and she could find herself painted with the same brush as Belle. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Clara tensed, then relaxed when she heard a woman's voice. "Miss Thornton, it's Belle. Can I come in?" Clara opened the door to find the saloon girl standing in the shadows, no longer in her working dress, but wrapped in a modest shawl. Up close, she was younger than Clara had thought, maybe 20, with tired eyes that had seen too much. "I wanted to thank you," Belle said. People don't usually step in." "Come inside," Clara said, glancing at the empty street. "Would you like some tea?" Belle's eyes widened. "You'd have me in your shop." "Why wouldn't I?" "Because Belle gestured helplessly. "You know what I am." "I know you're a woman who was being bothered by a drunk. The rest is none of my business." Clara put the kettle on, trying not to think about what this might cost her if anyone saw. "Sit. You look exhausted." They drank tea in companionable silence. Two women who didn't fit Ember Hollow's narrow definitions. Finally, Belle spoke. "I sew a little. Learned from my ma before. If you ever need an extra pair of hands, I work hard." Clara thought of the growing pile of orders, of the long nights ahead. "Can you do a running stitch?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then come by tomorrow afternoon. I'll pay by the piece, fair wages for good work." Belle's eyes filled with tears. "You do that, but people will talk." "People already talk," Clara said. "Might as well give them something interesting to say." After Belle left, Clara returned to Eleanor's blue silk. The fabric shimmered in the lamplight. Beautiful and demanding. Like everything in this town, it required careful handling, precise stitches, and unwavering attention. She thought of Lucas Granger's steady presence, of Eleanor Hartley's calculated risk, of Belle's grateful tears. Ember Hollow was showing its layers: cruelty and kindness, judgment and acceptance, all twisted together like threads in a complex weave. Clara's needle flashed in the light as she worked, each stitch drawing her deeper into the fabric of the town itself. She'd wanted to build something here, and slowly, carefully, she was. But building meant being part of the structure, vulnerable to its pressures and shaped by its demands. The clock chimed midnight, but Clara kept sewing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests. But tonight, she had work to do, and that was enough. The storm rolled in late on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after Belle had started helping in the shop. Clara watched through the window as the sky turned the color of an old bruise. Purple-black clouds piling up against the mountains like a wall of divine judgment. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in as many minutes, and the wind picked up, sending dust devils dancing down Main Street. "We'd best close up early," Clara told Belle, who was carefully hemming a petticoat. "This one's going to be rough?" Belle glanced outside and shivered. "Reminds me of the storm that hit Abilene when I was little. Took the roof clean off our church." They were securing the shutters when the rain started, not gradually, but all at once, like someone had overturned a massive bucket. Within seconds, the street was a river of mud. Clara was just latching the last shutter when she saw him. Lucas Granger stood in her doorway, water streaming from his hat brim, one hand pressed to his left shoulder. His shirt, she noticed with professional alarm, was torn from shoulder to elbow, the fabric dark with something that wasn't just rain. "Sorry to trouble you," he said, and his voice was steadier than his stance. "But I recall you're handy with a needle." "Get inside," Clara ordered, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. Once he was in, she could see the damage better: a long gash on his shoulder, bleeding steadily, though not dangerously. "What happened?" "Spooked horse. Caught me against a fence post." He swayed slightly, and Clara pushed him into a chair. "It's not as bad as it looks." "I'll be the judge of that." She turned to Belle. "Get my medical supplies from the back room, the wooden box on the top shelf." Belle hurried away, and Clara helped Lucas out of his wet coat. The shirt would have to be cut away; it was ruined anyway. She tried not to notice the solid warmth of him, the way the lamplight caught the water droplets on his skin. "This is becoming a habit," she said, attempting lightness as she examined the wound. "You needing my help with torn clothing." "Last time was simpler," he agreed. "Just a shirt then, no blood involved." Belle returned with the supplies, took one look at Lucas's bare shoulder, and busied herself with building up the fire. Clara appreciated the discretion. This was already improper enough, treating a half-dressed man in her shop. "This will need stitches," Clara said. "I can do it, but it'll hurt." "Can't be worse than the time I got kicked by a Mustang." Lucas's attempt at a smile faltered as Clara cleaned the wound with whiskey from her medicinal stores. He hissed through his teeth but didn't pull away. "Hold still." Clara threaded her needle, grateful her hands were steady despite the way her pulse raced. This close, she could smell leather and rain and something uniquely cedar, maybe, or sage. "Tell me about your ranch. Distraction helps." "It's not much. Couple 100 head of cattle, some horses, north of here, up where Butler's Creek meets the Sweetwater." His voice roughened as she made the first stitch, but he kept talking. "Been working it alone since my wife died." Clara's hand paused for just a moment. She'd heard he was a widower, but hadn't expected him to mention it so plainly. "I'm sorry. 4 years ago now, fever took her and the baby she was carrying." He said it simply, like stating the weather, but Clara heard the old grief underneath. Town expected me to sell, move on, but the land was all I had left of her. She loved that place. Clara continued her work, neat stitches closing the wound. The storm raged outside, rattling the windows, but inside the shop felt separate from the world, a small circle of lamplight and quiet conversation. "Why are you in town in this weather?" she asked. "Supplies. didn't expect the storm to hit so fast. He winced as she tied off another stitch. Seemed like fate when it drove me to your door. Fate or poor planning? That surprised a laugh out of him, cut short by a grunt of pain. Fair point. Belle brought over a cup of coffee, strong and black, and Lucas accepted it gratefully. She'd been so quiet, Clara had almost forgotten she was there. But now she noticed how Belle watched them not with gossip's greedy interest, but with something almost wistful. There, Clara said finally, tying off the last stitch. Keep it clean and dry. Come back in a week, and I'll remove the stitches. What do I owe you? Nothing. Call it payment for defending my arithmetic that first day. He looked like he might argue, then nodded. All right, but I pay my debts. Miss Thornton, one way or another. Clara found a shirt among her men's samples, one that had been made for a customer who'd never collected it. It fit Lucas well enough, though tight across the shoulders. She tried not to notice the way he moved, careful of his injury, but still with that unconscious grace. The storm showed no signs of letting up. If anything, it had intensified, turning the windows opaque with driving rain. Lightning split the sky, followed immediately by thunder that shook the building. You can't ride in this, Clara said. Either of you, she added, looking at Belle. You'll stay here tonight. Belle's eyes widened. Both of us, but people will understand that I wasn't sending anyone out to drown. Clara's tone brooked no argument. Belle, you can take my bed. I'll sleep on the cot in the workroom. And me? Lucas asked, a slight smile playing at his lips. You can have the floor by the fire. There are blankets in the chest. They made an odd domestic scene, Clara preparing a simple supper from her stores, Belle setting out blankets and pillows, Lucas tending the fire one-handed. The storm had transformed them from employer, hired help, and customer into something else, three people taking shelter together against the violence of nature. Over their meal of biscuits, preserved peaches, and more coffee, the conversation drifted to safer topics. Belle told a funny story about a customer at the saloon who'd tried to pay his tab with a supposedly lucky rabbit's foot. Lucas shared tales from his cattle drives, painting pictures of endless skies and dangerous river crossings. Clara found herself talking about Denver, about the opera house there and the elaborate gowns she'd helped create. You miss it, Lucas observed. The city. Clara considered this. I miss parts of it, the culture, the variety, but... She looked around the small shop, at Belle laughing at something Lucas had said, at the warm fire holding back the storm. I'm building something here. That matters more. Millicent said something similar once. Lucas said roots were worth more than wings, if you planted them in good soil. Was she right? He met her eyes across the table. I'm starting to think so. The moment stretched between them, charged as the air before lightning. Belle coughed delicately. I should turn in, early morning tomorrow. After Belle retreated to the back room, Clara and Lucas sat in companionable silence, listening to the storm. She worked on Eleanor's blue dress, almost finished now, while he watched the fire. Thank you, he said suddenly. Not just for this, he gestured to his shoulder. For what you did for Belle, for young Tom Paulson, for not being what this town expected. And what did they expect? Someone easier to dismiss, I suppose. Someone who'd either fold under their judgment or rage against it. He turned to look at her fully. You do neither. You just continue, like water wearing down stone. Clara set down her sewing. Sometimes I want to rage. But you don't. No, my aunt taught me better. Dignity is its own defense. She used to say, smart woman. Lucas shifted, wincing slightly. Though I'd add that sometimes dignity needs backup. That's why I've been keeping an eye out. I've noticed. Clara had seen him more often lately, happening to be nearby when the rougher men gathered outside her shop, arriving at the mercantile when Jake Morrison got too familiar, appearing at the hotel dining room when she took her weekly meal there. "I can take care of myself." "Never said you couldn't, but this town—" He paused, choosing his words. "It's changing. New money coming in. Railroad surveys getting closer. The old ways are fighting the new, and people like you get caught in between." "People like me?" "Independent, skilled, not looking for anyone's permission to exist." He stood, moving to the window where rain still lashed the glass. "Change makes people mean. They see you building something on your own terms, and it threatens them." Clara joined him at the window, careful to maintain proper distance. Outside, Ember Hollow was transformed familiar landmarks obscured by water and darkness. "And you, do I threaten you?" He turned to her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "No, Miss Thornton." "You give me hope." Before she could ask what he meant, lightning flashed, illuminating his face for one brilliant moment. Then thunder crashed, and the moment broke. "I should let you rest," Lucas said. "Dawn comes early, storm or no storm." Clara helped him arrange the blankets by the fire, their hands brushing as they worked. Each touch sent warmth through her that had nothing to do with the flames. When he was settled, she stood awkwardly, unsure how to end this strange, intimate evening. "Good night, Mr. Granger." "Lucas," he corrected softly. "I think we're past formalities. Don't you—" "Lucas," she repeated, tasting the name. "Good night." In the workroom, Clara lay on the narrow cot, listening to the storm and the quiet sounds of the shop Belle's soft breathing from the bedroom, the creak of floorboards as Lucas shifted by the fire. She thought about what he'd said about change, about hope, about threats and promises. Her shoulder ached from bending over her sewing, and her eyes were tired from the detailed work. But there was something else, a warmth in her chest, a loosening of the constant vigilance she'd maintained since arriving in Ember Hollow. For tonight, at least, she wasn't alone. For tonight. The storm outside only made the shelter within more precious. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. People would talk about Lucas spending the night, about Belle's presence, about propriety and reputation. But tonight, Clara allowed herself to feel safe, to feel seen, to feel something dangerously close to home. The rain continued its assault on the roof, but Clara smiled in the darkness. Let it rage. Inside, there was warmth and companionship and the promise of something she didn't quite dare name. Not yet, but soon, perhaps, when the storm passed and the sun returned, bringing with it all the complications of day. For now, though, there was just this three unlikely souls weathering the tempest together, finding in each other the shelter that no building alone could provide. The evening started quietly enough. Clara was closing the shop, Belle having left early to help her ailing landlady, when she heard the commotion from the saloon. Nothing unusual there. Saturday nights always brought noise, but something in the timbre of the voices, angry and escalating, made her pause at her door. Then she heard it clearly. That red-headed seamstress thinks she's too good for this town. Clara's hand stilled on the key. Through the twilight, she could see a crowd gathering outside the dusty boot. At its center stood Emmett Prescott, the new rancher who'd bought the old Callahan spread. He was everything Lucas wasn't: loud, flashy, with money to burn and opinions to match. I tried to be friendly, Prescott was saying, whiskey slurring his words. Offered to set her up nice, give her pretty things, but she looked at me like I was dirt beneath her fancy boots. Clara remembered the encounter he was twisting. Prescott had cornered her outside the Mercantile last week, suggesting she'd be wasted on dressmaking when she could have easier work under his protection. She'd told him exactly what she thought of his offer. Probably sharing her favors with that half-breed Granger instead, someone called out, earning ugly laughter. The blood drained from Clara's face, then rushed back hot, before she could think better of it. She was striding across the street, her fury giving her courage. Mr. Prescott! she called out, her voice cutting through the noise like shears through silk. The crowd turned. Some men had the grace to look ashamed, but Prescott's face split in a smile that made her skin crawl. "Well, speak of the devil. Come to apologize for your rudeness, Miss High and Mighty." Clara stopped just outside the circle of men, drawing herself to her full height. The lamplight from the saloon caught her hair, turning it to flame. "I came to set the record straight." "Oh, this should be good." Prescott laughed. "The lady has something to say." "I'm not some saloon girl," Clara said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden hush. "Though if I were, I'd still deserve more respect than you've shown. I'm a businesswoman, Mr. Prescott. I pay my debts, I do honest work, and I don't need your protection or anyone else's." Prescott's face darkened. "You think you're better than us?" "No." Clara met his eyes steadily. "I think I'm exactly what I am, no better, no worse. It's you who seems confused about that." "You sharp-tongued—" "Prescott." The voice came from behind Clara, quiet, but with an edge that could cut glass. Lucas Granger emerged from the shadows, and Clara noticed how the crowd shifted, creating space. "You've had your say, now move along." Prescott sneered. "Coming to rescue your woman, Granger, or is she paying you for protection with more than money?" The speed of Lucas's movement caught everyone off guard. One moment, he was standing relaxed. The next, he had Prescott's collar in his fist. The larger man pulled up on his toes. "Apologize," Lucas said softly. "To the lady." "I don't apologize to—" Lucas's grip tightened. "Wrong answer." The crowd had gone dead silent. Clara could hear her own heartbeat, could see the calculation in Prescott's eyes as he realized he'd pushed too far. "I spoke out of turn," Prescott managed. "To the lady," Lucas repeated. Prescott's face was purple, but he turned to Clara. "My apologies, Miss Thornton." Lucas released him, and Prescott stumbled back. For a moment, violence hung in the air like smoke. Then Sheriff Watson pushed through the crowd. "That's enough excitement for one night," the sheriff said, though Clara noticed he'd taken his time arriving. "Everyone go on home or back to your drinks." The crowd dispersed slowly, men muttering and casting glances back. Prescott straightened his collar, shot Lucas a look that promised this wasn't over, and stalked into the saloon. Clara found herself standing in the middle of the now empty street with Lucas. Her hands were shaking, adrenaline making her feel lightheaded. "You shouldn't have done that," Lucas said quietly. The words stung. "I had to say something. He was—" "I know what he was doing." Lucas turned to face her fully, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "But men like Prescott don't forget public humiliation. You've made an enemy." "I've had enemies before." "Not like him." Lucas removed his hat, ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "He's got money, men who'll do what he says, and now he's got a grudge." They stood there for a moment, the night air cool against Clara's heated face. From the saloon came the sound of forced laughter, the night trying to return to normal. "Come on," Lucas said finally. "I'll walk you back." They moved in silence until they reached her shop. Clara unlocked the door but didn't enter, turning instead to face Lucas. "What he said about you and me?" "Doesn't matter," Lucas cut her off. "People will think what they want." "Doesn't it bother you?" He looked at her for a long moment. "What bothers me is that he's right about one thing. I do want to protect you, have since that first day in the mercantile." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his blue eyes. "But not because you're weak, because you're extraordinary, and this town doesn't know what to do with extraordinary." Clara's heart was racing again, but for different reasons now. "Lucas—" "I know," he said. "Wrong time, wrong place, wrong everything. But I wanted you to know. In case—" He didn't finish the sentence. "In case what?" in case Prescott decides to make good on the promise in his eyes. Lucas settled his hat back on his head. Lock your door. Keep that pistol close. And if anything seems off, anything at all, you send word to me. He started to leave, then turned back. What you said tonight about deserving respect, you're right. But being right and being safe aren't always the same thing. After he left, Clara stood in her darkened shop, trying to make sense of the evening. The confrontation with Prescott had been building since that first unwelcome advance. She'd known it would come to a head eventually. But Lucas's reaction, his words... She lit a lamp and tried to focus on work, but her hands wouldn't steady. Lucas wanted to protect her, not because he thought her weak, but because he found her extraordinary. The word echoed in her mind, warming her even as worry gnawed at her belly. A soft knock made her jump. Belle's voice came through the door. "Clara, it's me. I heard what happened." Clara let her in, grateful for the company. Belle's face was creased with concern. "The whole town's talking about it." Belle said, "How you faced down Prescott. How Lucas nearly threw him through the saloon window." "It wasn't that dramatic." "Maybe not, but it's already growing in the telling." Belle sat down heavily. "Clara, I'm worried. I've seen men like Prescott before. They don't like being shown up, especially by a woman." "I know." Clara poured them both tea, her hands finally steady. "But I couldn't just stand there while he spread lies." "No, you couldn't," Belle agreed. "That's what makes you different from most folks. But different can be dangerous." They sat in companionable silence, sipping their tea. Finally, Belle spoke again. "Lucas Granger's in love with you." Clara nearly dropped her cup. "Belle." "It's true. Everyone can see it except maybe you. The way he watches you, shows up wherever you might need him." Belle smiled sadly. "I had a man look at me like that once, before I ended up here. It's not proper." "Since when has proper mattered to you?" Belle asked gently. "You hired a saloon girl. You stood up to Prescott. You're already breaking their rules." Clara thought about Lucas's eyes in the lamplight, about the controlled violence when he'd grabbed Prescott, about the word extraordinary spoken like a prayer. "It's complicated," she said finally. "Love always is." Belle stood to leave. "Just be careful, and maybe think about what you want, not just what's proper. Life's too short, and this frontier's too hard to ignore the good things when they come along." After Belle left, Clara tried once more to work, but the events of the evening kept intruding. She could still feel the weight of all those eyes on her, the ugly insinuations in Prescott's voice, the way the crowd had hungry for whatever drama might unfold. But stronger than that was the memory of Lucas's presence at her back, the quiet authority in his voice, the admission that had changed everything between them. He found her extraordinary, in a place that wanted to make her small. He saw her as larger than life. The problem was, being extraordinary in Ember Hollow might get her killed. Or worse, might get Lucas killed defending her. The thought sent ice through her veins. Outside, she heard horses riding hard through town, unusual for this late hour. Clara moved to the window, peering through the curtain. She couldn't see much, but something about the urgency of those hoofbeats raised the hair on her arms. She checked the locks again, made sure her pistol was loaded and within reach. Then she sat down to finish Eleanor's blue dress, needle moving in steady rhythm. Whatever came next, she'd meet it with clear eyes and steady hands. But as she sewed, she couldn't shake the feeling that tonight had set something in motion, something that would test every ounce of strength and dignity she possessed. In standing up to Prescott, in letting Lucas reveal his feelings, she'd crossed a line. There was no going back now, only forward, into whatever storm was brewing on Ember Hollow's horizon. The Sunday church social was the event of the season in Ember Hollow, one of the few occasions where the entire town gathered for something other than commerce or crisis. Clara had deliberated for days about attending. After the confrontation with Prescott 2 weeks prior, She'd noticed the way conversations stopped when she entered the mercantile, how women whispered behind their fans when she passed. But Eleanor Hartley had been insistent. "You'll wear the blue dress," she'd said, brooking no argument. "The one you made for me. I've had my fill of it, and it needs to be seen on someone who can do it justice." Now, standing before her mirror in the silk creation she'd labored over, Clara had to admit Eleanor had been right. The midnight blue fabric seemed to capture and hold light, the high neck and long sleeves providing modesty, while the expertly fitted bodice and subtle train spoke of sophistication. She'd never worn anything so fine. Belle helped her with the buttons. "You look like a queen," she breathed. "Every woman there will want to scratch your eyes out." "That's not exactly encouraging." "Sure it is. Means you're winning." Belle adjusted a fold in the skirt. "Lucas Granger won't know what hit him." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. Since that night outside the saloon, she and Lucas had maintained careful distance, polite nods on the street. Nothing more. But she felt his presence like atmospheric pressure, constant and inescapable. The church hall was already crowded when Clara arrived. Lanterns hung from every beam, casting warm light over the assembled townspeople. Tables groaned under the weight of pies and casseroles. And in the corner, old Henry Fitzgerald was tuning his fiddle. Conversation faltered as Clara entered. She felt the weight of every stare, heard the sharp intake of breath from the gossip corner where Prudence Morrison held court. But she kept her chin high, moving through the room with the grace her mother had drilled into her years ago. Clara Eleanor Hartley appeared at her elbow, resplendent in rose taffeta. "Perfect timing. Come, let me introduce you properly to some people." For the next hour, Eleanor guided Clara through a careful social dance. The mayor's wife complimented her needlework. The bank manager's daughter asked about commissioning a riding habit. Slowly, carefully, Eleanor was weaving Clara into the fabric of respectability. But Clara was aware of other eyes too, Prescott and his men lounging near the punch bowl, their gazes following her movements, and Lucas standing with the other ranchers but somehow separate, his expression unreadable. When Henry struck up the first dance, a Virginia reel, Clara found herself without a partner. She was prepared to spend the evening on the sidelines when a hand appeared in her peripheral vision. "May I have this dance, Miss Thornton?" She looked up to find Lucas standing before her, dressed in his Sunday best, a black coat that emphasized his broad shoulders, string tie knotted precisely. His hair was trimmed, his jaw freshly shaved, but his eyes held the same steady warmth she remembered. The hall seemed to hold its breath as Clara placed her hand in his. "I'd be honored. Mr. Granger." They took their place in the line of dancers. Clara was aware of every whisper, every sidelong glance. But as the music started and they began to move, the rest of the world faded away. Lucas was a surprisingly good dancer, his movements confident and sure. When the dance required them to promenade, his hand at her back was steady, proper yet somehow protective. "You're causing quite a stir," he murmured as they passed close. "I usually do," she replied, "though the dress is doing most of the work." "The dress is just fabric." His voice dropped lower. "It's the woman wearing it that takes breath away." Before Clara could respond, the dance separated them again. When they came back together, she was grateful for the excuse of exertion to explain her flushed cheeks. The reel ended, but Henry immediately launched into a waltz. Couples began forming, and Clara started to step away, but Lucas's hand at her elbow stopped her. "One more." She should say no. They'd already given the gossips enough fodder. But the way he looked at her, not with ownership or assumption, but with genuine request, made her nod. The waltz was more intimate than the reel, requiring them to face each other, his hand at her waist, hers on his shoulder. They moved together as if they'd done this 100 times before, finding rhythm and harmony without effort. "People are staring," Clara said. "Let them." Lucas guided her through a turn. "You were right. What you said to Prescott, you deserve respect. And if dancing with you helps make that point, I'll dance every dance until my boots wear through. That's not why you asked me. No, he admitted. I asked because I've wanted to dance with you since you walked in wearing that dress. Because I'm tired of pretending I don't think about you every moment. Because life's too short and too hard to waste chances. Clara's breath caught. Around them, other couples swirled. But she felt suspended in amber. Caught in this moment with this man who saw her truly. Lucas. I know, he said quietly. I know all the reasons this is complicated, but tonight, can we just be? Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. They finished the waltz in silence, but it was a silence full of promise, of possibility, of things that couldn't be said in a crowded room but hummed between them like electricity. When the music ended, Clara became aware of their audience again. Some faces showed approval. Eleanor Hartley's small smile. Belle watching from the serving table with bright eyes. But others were less kind. Prescott's face was dark with anger, and several of the town's moral guardians looked ready to combust with indignation. Thank you for the dance, Clara said formally, stepping back. The pleasure was mine. Lucas bowed slightly, proper as any gentleman, but his eyes held heat that was anything but proper. Enjoy your evening, Miss Thornton. He walked away, leaving Clara feeling oddly bereft. She was immediately surrounded by women, some genuinely interested in her work, others fishing for gossip about Lucas Granger's intentions. Clara deflected them all with polite non-answers. The rest of the social passed in a blur. Clara danced with the banker, the minister, even young Tom Paulson, who was so nervous he stepped on her feet 3 times. But no dance matched the perfect rhythm she'd found with Lucas. As the evening wound down, Clara stepped outside for air. The night was cool, stars brilliant in the clear sky. She was admiring them when footsteps made her turn. Prescott stood there, whiskey heavy on his breath despite the temperance pledge of church socials. Quite a display in there. Clara started to move past him, but he stepped into her path. Excuse me. You think you're clever, don't you, getting Granger to dance with you, making yourself look respectable? His voice was ugly with drink and anger. But I know what you are. Just another saloon girl putting on airs. You're drunk, Mr. Prescott. Step aside. Or what, you'll have your lover fight me again. He leaned closer. He won't always be around to protect you. She doesn't need protection from the likes of you. Both Clara and Prescott turned to find Sheriff Watson standing in the doorway. His usual lazy demeanor was replaced by something harder. Evening, Sheriff, Prescott said, attempting charm. Just having a conversation. Conversation's over. Mrs. Watson's ready to leave, and she'll want to say goodbye to Miss Thornton. The sheriff's hand rested casually on his pistol. You'll be moving along now, Prescott. For a moment, Prescott's face showed pure rage. Then he smiled, tipped his hat mockingly to Clara, and sauntered away. Thank you, Clara said once he was gone. Watson studied her. I've been sheriff here 15 years. Seen all kinds come through. You're not what they think you are. He paused. But you're not making life easy for yourself either. Dancing with Granger, hiring Belle, standing up to fools like Prescott. Should I apologize for that? No, but you should be careful. This town's changing, and change makes people dangerous. He touched his hat. Evening. Miss Thornton. Clara returned to the social, but the magic of the evening had dimmed. She made her farewells, thanking Eleanor for the loan of the dress, and started the walk back to her shop. She'd made it halfway when she heard horses approaching fast. Lucas appeared out of the darkness, mounted on his bay gelding. Thought you might want an escort. He said, I can walk 2 blocks by myself. I know you can, but humor me. Clara looked up at him, this man who danced like a gentleman and fought like a warrior. who saw her strength and still wanted to protect her. All right. He dismounted, walking beside her and leading his horse. They didn't speak until they reached her shop. "Thank you," Clara said, "for the dances, for everything." Lucas stepped closer, and Clara's breath caught. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture achingly tender. "Lock your door," he said softly. "Prescott's drunk and angry. That's a dangerous combination." "I'll be fine." "I know," he smiled, and it transformed his face. "You're extraordinary, remember?" He mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Clara standing in her doorway, hand pressed to where he'd touched her hair. The evening had shown her two things clearly. She was winning her place in Ember Hollow's respectable society, and she was falling in love with Lucas Granger. Both victories came with their own dangers, but as Clara locked her door and prepared for bed, still wearing the blue silk that had caused such a stir, she couldn't bring herself to regret either one. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, she danced in Lucas Granger's arms while the whole town watched. Tonight, she'd been extraordinary. And that, Clara decided as she finally closed her eyes, was worth whatever storms tomorrow might bring. The winter storm hit Ember Hollow like a fist from God. Clara had seen blizzards in Denver, but nothing like this. A white wall of fury that turned day into night and made the world disappear beyond arm's length. The temperature plummeted so fast that water froze in buckets, and the wind howled like a living thing bent on destruction. Clara had closed the shop early, sending Belle home while travel was still possible. Now she sat by her stove, wrapped in every blanket she owned, listening to the building groan under the assault. She was just thinking of making more tea when pounding on her door made her jump. "Clara, open up!" It was Tom Paulson, the livery boy. Snow-covered and gasping, she yanked him inside, fighting the wind to close the door. "Tom, what are you doing out in this day?" "It's the men." He was shaking, from cold or fear or both. "They went up to Bitter Creek Ridge this morning, before the storm hit. My uncle, Sheriff Watson, Lucas Granger, and 3 others. They were checking on the Hendricks family. Their baby's been sick." Clara's blood turned to ice. Bitter Creek Ridge was treacherous in good weather. In a storm like this, when should they have been back? "Hours ago. Ma's beside herself. Doc Morrison says anyone caught up there in this." Tom couldn't finish. Clara moved without thinking, reaching for her heavy coat. "How many people know?" "Most of the town, but nobody can do anything until the storm breaks." Which could be days. Clara had seen men frozen solid in lesser storms, had heard stories of entire search parties vanishing into white oblivion. The thought of Lucas up there, perhaps injured, perhaps... "Miss Clara?" Tom's voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. "Ma wanted me to ask, do you have any spare blankets for if they make it back?" "Take whatever you need," Clara said automatically. "The chest in the back room." While Tom gathered blankets, Clara stood at her window, staring into the white nothing. Somewhere out there, 6 men were fighting for their lives. One of them had held her while they danced, had called her extraordinary, had touched her hair with infinite tenderness. The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of waiting and praying. The storm raged on, trapping everyone indoors. Clara kept her shop open despite having no customers, needing something to do with her hands. She sewed mechanically a shirt here, a hem there, while her mind conjured increasingly terrible scenarios. Belle managed to fight her way to the shop on the 2nd day, bringing news. "They're organizing a search party for when it breaks. Prescott's refusing to let his men help, says it's not his problem." "Of course he is," Clara said bitterly. "The whole town's praying. Even Big Mike closed the saloon." Belle paused. "Everyone knows about you and Lucas now, how you feel about each other." Clara didn't bother denying it. What was the point of propriety when the man she loved might be dead on a mountainside? On the 3rd night, the storm finally exhausted itself. Clara woke to eerie silence and weak sunlight filtering through ice-glazed windows. She was pulling on her boots when commotion erupted outside. "They're back. The rescue party found them." Clara ran outside without her coat. Joining the crowd gathering on Main Street, she saw horses, first exhausted animals, trudging through chest-deep snow. Then she saw the men. Sheriff Watson was in the lead, frost in his beard but upright in his saddle. 2 others followed, equally battered but alive. Then came a makeshift travois, and Clara's heart stopped. Lucas lay motionless on the stretched canvas, his face gray as death. His left arm was strapped to his chest, and his right leg was splinted with rough branches. Blood had soaked through the bandages, wrapping his shoulder, the same shoulder she'd stitched weeks ago. "Where's Doc Morrison?" someone called. "Here." The doctor pushed through the crowd, took one look at Lucas, and pointed to Clara's shop. "Take him there. It's closest. And I'll need space to work." Men lifted the travois, careful but urgent. Clara ran ahead, throwing open her door and clearing her work table. They transferred Lucas onto it, and Clara bit back a cry at how still he was. How cold. "Everyone out except Miss Thornton." Doc Morrison ordered, "I need another pair of hands, and hers are steadiest." The next hour was the longest of Clara's life. She followed the doctor's terse instructions, cutting away frozen clothing, cleaning wounds, holding Lucas still when pain finally penetrated his unconsciousness, and he thrashed weakly. Dislocated shoulder, broken ribs, fractured leg. Morrison muttered as he worked. "Looks like a fall. Must have gone over the edge in the whiteout." He glanced at Clara's white face. "But he's tough. If we can get him warm, stop the bleeding, prevent infection, tell me what to do." They worked in grim tandem. Clara's seamstress hands proved valuable. She could thread surgical needles in seconds, make tiny, precise stitches to close the gash in Lucas's side. When they finally finished, Lucas looked more mummy than man, wrapped in bandages and blankets. "Now we wait," Morrison said, washing his hands. "Keep him warm. Get broth into him if he wakes. Watch for fever." He studied Clara. "Can you handle this?" "Yes." "I'll be back every few hours. Sheriff Watson's wife is with the Hendricks baby. That's why they went up there in the first place. Whole family would have died without help." He gathered his supplies. "You saved lives today too, you know. Couldn't have managed without you." After the doctor left, Clara pulled a chair next to the table, turned bed. Lucas's breathing was shallow but steady. She took his uninjured hand in both of hers, shocked at how cold it still was. "Don't you dare die," she whispered fiercely. "Not now. Not when I haven't told you." What, that she loved him, that every time he walked into a room, her heart beat faster, that when he'd called her extraordinary, she'd felt seen for the first time in her life. "You have to live so I can tell you what a fool you were, going up that mountain." Tears ran down her face unchecked. "So I can dance with you again. So I can—" The door opened quietly. Belle entered, carrying a tray. "Brought soup and coffee. You need to eat." "I'm not hungry." "Don't care. Eat anyway." Belle set the tray down and studied Lucas. "He looks better than when they brought him in. He looks half dead." "The other half's what counts." Belle squeezed Clara's shoulder. "I'll mind the shop. You focus on him." The first night was the worst. Lucas burned with fever, muttering incoherently about snow and falling and someone named Margaret, his dead wife. Clara realized with a pang. She bathed his face with cool cloths, dripped water between his cracked lips, and talked to him constantly. "You're safe now," she told him. "You're in my shop. Remember where you came that night with your torn shirt, where we weathered the storm together? You're safe, and I'm here, and you're going to be fine." By dawn, the fever broke. Lucas's eyes opened, unfocused but aware. "Clara." His voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here." She squeezed his hand, weak with relief. "You're all right. You're safe." The Hendricks family, they're fine. Everyone's fine except you, you stubborn fool. She was crying again. What were you thinking? A ghost of his old smile touched his lips. Had to help, like you, that night with Belle. His eyes focused on her face. You've been crying. No, I haven't. Beautiful, even, when lying. His eyes closed again, but his breathing was deeper now, more natural. Clara stayed by his side for the next week, leaving only when Doc Morrison forced her to rest. The town watched and whispered. But for once, Clara didn't care. Let them see her devotion. Let them draw their conclusions. The man she loved was alive, and nothing else mattered. Slowly, painfully, Lucas improved. The shoulder healed clean, the ribs mended. The leg, though it would leave him with a permanent limp, grew stronger, but more than his body healed during those long days and nights. Something between him and Clara shifted, deepened, became as solid as the mountains surrounding Ember Hollow. They talked for hours about his wife, about Clara's parents, about dreams and fears and everything in between. The barriers of propriety had been shattered by crisis, and in their place grew something stronger, true knowing. I heard you, Lucas said one evening, when I was fevered. Heard you telling me not to die. Clara blushed. You were delirious. Maybe, but I heard you anyway. Held onto your voice like a rope in the darkness. He reached for her hand with his good arm. Clara, Don't, she interrupted. Not yet. Not until you're truly well. Coward, he said gently. Yes, she agreed. About this, yes. But she didn't let go of his hand, and he didn't ask her to. Outside, Ember Hollow went about its business. Forever changed by the storm and its aftermath. The men who'd risked their lives were heroes. The women who'd waited and prayed were heroines. And the seamstress who'd fought death for the cowboy she loved. She was, everyone agreed, truly extraordinary. Spring came slowly to Ember Hollow that year, as if the earth itself was recovering from the winter's violence. Clara watched the snow melt from her shop window, revealing the town that had become her home. Lucas sat in the chair she'd moved near the stove, his leg propped up, working on repairing a bridle with his good hand. It had been 6 weeks since the rescue, and he'd insisted on spending his days in her shop rather than recuperating at his ranch. Too quiet out there, he'd said, but they both knew the real reason. After those desperate days when she'd fought for his life, being apart felt wrong, like trying to breathe with only one lung. You're fretting again, Lucas said without looking up from his work. I'm not fretting, I'm thinking. Same thing with you. He set down the bridle and studied her. What is it? Clara hesitated, then pulled out the letter that had arrived that morning. Eleanor Hartley's sister in Denver. She runs a dress shop there, very exclusive. She's offering me a partnership. Lucas went very still. Denver? Yes. They sat in silence, the weight of the offer hanging between them. It was everything Clara had thought she wanted when she first arrived in Ember Hollow. Respect, success, escape from small-town judgment. But that was before Belle became her friend, before Eleanor showed her that acceptance could be earned, before Lucas. It's a good opportunity, Lucas said carefully. Yes. You should take it. Clara's head snapped up. What? You're meant for bigger things than Ember Hollow. His voice was steady, but she saw the tension in his jaw. I've always known that. Lucas Granger, you are the most infuriating. She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Is that what you think, that I'm just marking time here until something better comes along? Aren't you? She whirled to face him. 6 weeks ago, I held your hand while you burned with fever. I picked blood out from under my fingernails for days. I prayed to God for the first time since my parents died. And you think I did all that because I was marking time? Clara. No. She was trembling with anger now. You don't get to decide what I want. You don't get to push me away because you think it's noble." Lucas struggled to his feet, favoring his injured leg. "I'm not pushing. I'm trying to—" "To what? Protect me from what? Lucas, from choosing you, from choosing this life." She gestured around the shop. "This is my home. These are my people. You are my—" She stopped. The word love caught in her throat. "You're what?" He'd moved closer, his eyes intense. "You know what?" she whispered. "Say it." "Why? So you can tell me all the reasons it's impossible, so you can list why I deserve better." Tears ran down her face. "I know what I deserve. Lucas, I deserve a man who sees me clearly and loves me anyway, who makes me laugh, who treats me as an equal, who—" He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. 6 weeks of fear and longing, of careful distance and unspoken feelings, poured into that kiss. Clara's hands fisted in his shirt, and she kissed him back with equal fervor, trying to tell him without words that Denver held nothing for her, that everything she wanted was right here. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "You've got hands stronger than most men I rode with," he said softly, echoing words from weeks ago. "And a heart none of them ever had." "Lucas, I love you, Clara May Thornton. Have since you stood in Morrison's store and demanded fair arithmetic. Maybe before that." His hands cupped her face. "But I'm a broken-down rancher with a limp and ghosts. You could have—" "You!" Clara interrupted. "I could have you if you'll stop being noble and actually ask me." A smile broke across his face, transforming it. "Woman, you do beat all." "Is that a proposal?" "No." He stepped back, and Clara's heart sank. Then Lucas carefully lowered himself to one knee, grimacing slightly. "This is—" From his pocket, he pulled a small leather pouch. Inside was a ring not fancy, just a simple gold band with a small turquoise stone, the color of prairie sky. "It was my mother's," he said. "Been carrying it for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Marry me, Clara. Not because you saved my life, not because the town expects it, but because I can't imagine facing another day without knowing you'll be there at the end of it." Clara looked down at him, this proud man on his knee in her shop, offering his heart with the same quiet courage he'd shown facing down Prescott. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, of course, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then let her help him stand. This kiss was softer, sweeter, full of promise rather than desperation. "Well, finally." Belle's voice came from the doorway. She stood there grinning, not looking sorry at all for interrupting. "Half the town's got money riding on when you two would come to your senses." "Belle!" Clara's face flamed. "What? It's true. Martha Hendricks has been taking bets for weeks." Belle's expression softened. "I'm happy for you both. Really." Word spread through Ember Hollow like wildfire faster. Even within an hour, Clara's shop was full of well-wishers. Eleanor Hartley arrived with her husband, both beaming. "About time," Eleanor declared. "I was beginning to think I'd have to lock you both in the church until you sorted things out." Even Sheriff Watson stopped by, shaking Lucas's hand with a genuine warmth. "You did good, Granger. Both of you did." The only shadow on the day was Prescott, who made a point of riding past the shop slowly, his eyes cold as winter wind, but surrounded by friends and with Lucas's arm around her waist. Clara found she didn't care. That evening, after the visitors had gone, Clara and Lucas sat together by the stove. She'd pulled her chair close to his, their hands intertwined. "There's something else," Lucas said, "about the ranch." Clara tensed. "What about it?" "I've been thinking, it's too far from town, too isolated. What if we built a house here, keep the ranch for the cattle, but live in town? You could keep your shop. I could—" "Yes," Clara interrupted. Lucas blinked. "Just like that?" Did you think I'd give up my work, my independence? Some women do, when they marry. I'm not some women. No, Lucas agreed, lifting their joined hands to kiss her knuckles. You're extraordinary. Clara smiled, thinking of all the times that word had echoed between them. We both are, broken and mended and stronger for it. Like good leather, Lucas said. Romantic as always. You don't want romance, you want truth. Clara considered this. He was right, of course. She'd had enough of pretty lies and false faces. What she wanted, what she'd found, was something real and solid and worth fighting for. The truth, she said slowly, is that I came to Ember Hollow expecting nothing but a shop and solitude. Instead, I found a home, a family, and you. And a passel of trouble, Lucas added. That too, Clara laughed. But it was worth it. Every hard day, every whispered judgment, every moment of doubt worth it to be sitting here with you. Lucas squeezed her hand. So you'll write to Denver? Tell them no? First thing tomorrow. Clara stood, moving to the window where Main Street stretched out in the gathering dusk. Although... Clara May Thornton, don't you dare. She laughed, turning back to him. I was going to say, although I might order some fabric from Denver, if I'm going to make my own wedding dress. I want the finest silk they have. Minx, Lucas said fondly. You're minx, Clara corrected. Forever and always. He agreed. Outside, Ember Hollow settled into evening routines. Lamps were being lit, families gathering for supper, the saloon beginning its nightly revelry. It was an imperfect place, full of imperfect people, but it was home. Clara returned to Lucas's side, already planning the dress she'd make, the house they'd build, the life they'd create together. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing in Ember Hollow ever was. But sitting there in the lamplight with the man she loved, his grandmother's ring on her finger and hope in her heart, Clara knew it would be extraordinary. And that, she decided, was exactly what she deserved. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a nervous clerk from the land office. Clara was fitting Eleanor Hartley for a new summer dress when young Timothy knocked on her door, hat in hand and official documents clutched to his chest. Miss Thornton, I mean. Soon to be Mrs. Granger, he shifted anxiously. This came marked urgent, from the territorial office. Clara set down her pins, a cold weight settling in her stomach. Official letters rarely brought good news. She took the envelope, noting the heavy seal, the formal script. Shall I wait? Eleanor asked quietly, reading Clara's expression. No, please stay. Clara broke the seal and unfolded the document. As she read, the blood drained from her face. What is it? Eleanor moved closer, concern evident. The railroad, Clara said numbly. They're coming through Ember Hollow, and they want to buy Lucas's grazing land. All of it. Eleanor took the letter, scanning quickly. But this says the sale is already approved. How can that be? Clara's hands trembled as she reached for the second page. Because according to this, Emmett Prescott filed a claim dispute 6 weeks ago. He's arguing that Lucas's ownership isn't valid, that there was an error in the original deed. She looked up, eyes blazing. While Lucas was recovering from his injuries, Prescott was plotting to steal his land. The snake! Eleanor hissed the strongest language Clara had ever heard from the preacher's wife. What will you do? I need to find Lucas. He's checking the herd today. Won't be back until... The door burst open. Belle rushed in, face flushed from running. Clara, there's trouble at the town hall. Prescott's there with railroad men and a fancy lawyer from Denver. They're saying... I know what they're saying. Clara was already reaching for her shawl. Eleanor, can you... Go, Eleanor said firmly. I'll find the Reverend. We'll gather support. Clara ran through the streets of Ember Hollow, her mind racing. 6 weeks. While she'd been nursing Lucas back to health. While they'd been planning their future. Prescott had been maneuvering to destroy it all. The town hall was packed. At the front, Prescott stood with 3 men in city suits, their polished shoes and clean hands marking them as outsiders. Sheriff Watson was there, looking uncomfortable, along with Mayor Bridwell and several other town officials. Quite clear that the original survey was flawed. One of the Denver men was saying, "Mr. Prescott's claim predates Mr. Granger's by several months." "That's a lie." Clara pushed through the crowd. "Lucas's family has worked that land for 20 years. Prescott's smile was oily with satisfaction. "Miss Thornton, how nice of you to join us. Though I don't see what business this is of yours." "The Lucas Granger is my fiancé. His business is mine." "How touching." Prescott turned to the railroad men. "As you can see, emotions run high here, but the law is the law." "What law?" Lucas's voice came from the doorway. He stood there, still favoring his injured leg, but his presence filled the room. "The law that says a man can file false claims while another fights for his life." "Granger," Prescott's confidence flickered. "You should be resting." Hard to rest when vultures are circling. Lucas moved through the crowd, Clara meeting him halfway. He squeezed her hand briefly before facing Prescott. "You want to challenge my ownership? Fine, but you'll do it properly, in court, with a real judge, not in some back room deal." The lead railroad man cleared his throat. "Mr. Granger, we're sympathetic to your position, but we have schedules to keep. If Mr. Prescott's claim is valid." "It's not," Clara interrupted. "And we can prove it." Everyone turned to stare at her. Clara lifted her chin, mind racing. "My aunt kept records of everything, including the original land transfers when this area was settled." "Lucas, when did your family acquire the ranch?" "Spring of '55. My father bought it from Samuel Morrison, Doc Morrison's uncle." Clara smiled. "And I have the receipt, in my aunt's files. She witnessed the transaction." Prescott's face darkened. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Clara turned to the railroad men. "Gentlemen, I suggest you delay any decisions until we can present proper documentation, unless you want to risk a legal challenge that could delay your railroad for months." The men exchanged glances. The lead one nodded slowly. "That seems prudent. We'll postpone any action for 2 weeks. That should give both parties time to gather evidence." 2 weeks, Prescott protested. "But we had an agreement, which was contingent on clear ownership," the man said coolly. 2 weeks. Gentlemen, we'll reconvene then." After the railroad men left, the crowd dispersed slowly, buzzing with gossip. Prescott paused beside Clara and Lucas on his way out. "You think you're clever," he said quietly, "but paper won't save you. I've got resources you can't imagine." "And I've got something you don't," Lucas replied. "The truth." Prescott's laugh was ugly. "Truth in a frontier town, money talks louder than truth. Granger, you'll see." After he left, Clara sagged against Lucas. "Please tell me you actually remember that receipt?" "Vaguely. But Clara, even if you find it—" "I'll find it." She straightened, jaw set with determination. "That man has threatened us for the last time. He wants a fight. He'll get one." The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Clara turned her shop into a war room, sorting through her aunt's meticulous files while Belle helped organize documents. Lucas rode to neighboring ranches, gathering testimonies from old-timers who remembered his father's purchase. Eleanor Hartley proved invaluable, her social connections yielding unexpected support. Prescott's made enemies. She reported, "His high-handed ways have offended more than just you." Even Tom Paulson contributed, shyly offering a box of old newspapers his mother had saved. "Thought there might be something useful," he mumbled. There was The Spring City Gazette from April 1855 contained a notice of land transfer, complete with Lucas's father's name and the exact boundaries of the ranch. But Prescott wasn't idle. Strange men appeared in town, asking questions, offering bribes. One night, Clara's shop window was broken, nothing stolen, just a warning. Lucas wanted to post guards, but Clara refused. "I won't live in fear," she said, sweeping up glass. "That's what he wants." The night before the hearing, Clara finally found the receipt, yellowed with age but legible, with her aunt's careful signature as witness. She stared at it, this simple piece of paper that could save everything. "It's almost anticlimactic," she told Lucas. "All this drama over a scrap of paper." "Not just paper." Lucas pulled her close. "It's proof that my father built something worth saving, that your aunt saw value in recording truth, that you're willing to fight for what matters." Clara leaned into his warmth. Tomorrow would bring challenges, but tonight she had the solid presence of the man she loved, the weapon of truth in her hand, and the knowledge that she'd earned her place in this town. The hearing was set for 10 o'clock. By 9, the town hall was packed. It seemed all of Ember Hollow had turned out shopkeepers, ranchers, farmers, even some of Big Mike's saloon girls. Clara noticed Belle in the back, wearing her most respectable dress. Prescott arrived with his Denver lawyer and a stack of official-looking documents. His confidence had returned, bolstered by whatever schemes he'd hatched in the interim. Judge Thornwood no relation, despite the name called the hearing to order. He was an old circuit judge, known for his fairness and intolerance of fancy legal maneuvering. "Let's keep this simple," he said. "Mr. Prescott, state your claim." The Denver lawyer rose, launching into a complex argument about survey errors, prior claims, and territorial statutes. He produced maps, affidavits, and enough legal jargon to make Clara's head spin. "Impressive," Judge Thornwood said dryly when he finished. "Mr. Granger, your response." Lucas stood. "Your Honor, I have here—" "Actually," Clara interrupted, standing as well, "I'd like to present our evidence." The judge raised an eyebrow. "And you are—" "Clara May Thornton, Your Honor, Mr. Granger's fiancée and his legal representative." Prescott laughed. "She's a seamstress, not a lawyer." "Mr. Prescott," the judge said coldly. "In my courtroom, anyone may speak for another if no objection is raised. Mr. Granger, do you object?" Lucas smiled. "Not at all, Your Honor." "Then proceed, Miss Thornton." Clara moved forward, her evidence in hand. "Your Honor, I have here 3 documents. First, a receipt dated April 15, 1855, showing the legal transfer of land from Samuel Morrison to James Granger. Second, a newspaper notice announcing the same. Third, and most interesting." She paused, meeting Prescott's eyes. "An affidavit from Mr. Morrison himself, written 2 days ago, confirming the sale and noting that Mr. Prescott approached him 6 weeks ago, offering substantial money to lie about it." The courtroom erupted. Prescott shot to his feet. "That's a lie you can't prove." "I can," Doc Morrison said from the gallery. "That's my uncle's signature. And yes, Prescott tried to bribe him. Fortunately, my uncle has something Prescott doesn't: integrity." Judge Thornwood banged his gavel. "Order, Mr. Prescott. These are serious allegations." "They're lies." Prescott's carefully maintained composure cracked. "I have connections, I have." "What you have," the judge interrupted, "is a fraudulent claim and possible charges of bribery and intimidation. Case dismissed. Mr. Granger's ownership stands." The cheer that went up could probably be heard in Denver. Clara found herself lifted off her feet as Lucas spun her around, his injury forgotten in the moment of victory. "You did it," he breathed. "You amazing, extraordinary woman." "We did it," she corrected. "Together." As they left the courthouse, surrounded by well-wishers, Clara caught sight of Prescott being escorted away by Sheriff Watson. His empire of threats and schemes had crumbled, brought down by truth and the courage to speak it. "You know what this means?" Lucas asked as they finally reached her shop.
"The ranch is safe."
"More than that." He pulled her close. "It means we have a future to build. No more shadows, no more threats. Just us and whatever we choose to create." Clara smiled, thinking of the wedding dress still half finished in her back room, of the house they'd planned, of the life stretching ahead of them in this imperfect, wonderful town.
"Then we'd better get started," she said. "After all, we have a lot of creating to do."
And there, in the doorway of her shop, with half of Ember Hollow still celebrating in the street, Lucas kissed her a promise of all the creative days to come. The evening was perfect, the kind that only came to Ember Hollow in late spring when the desert gave way to gentleness. Clara stood on the porch of her shop, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. Tomorrow was her wedding day, but tonight she had one last evening as Clara May Thornton, seamstress and independent woman of Ember Hollow. The shop door opened behind her, and Belle stepped out.
"Your dress is ready," she said softly. "Want to see it one more time?"
Clara shook her head.
"I trust your finishing work. Besides, I'm not looking at the dress right now."
"What are you looking at?"
"Everything."
Clara gestured to the street, where familiar faces moved through familiar routines. "When I first arrived here, all I saw were strangers and judgment. Now you see home," Belle finished.
"Yes."
Clara turned to her friend, for that's what Belle had become, despite all of society's rules saying they shouldn't be. "You'll still help in the shop after I'm married." Belle smiled.
"Try to stop me. Though folks are talking about expanding, Sarah Paulson thinks we should take on apprentices, teach other women the trade."
It was a dream Clara had barely dared voice, but hearing it from Belle made it feel possible. A place where women could learn skills, earn independence, build their own futures. "Lucas would support it," she said. "That man would support you if you decided to fly to the moon." Belle laughed. "Speaking of which..." Clara turned to see Lucas approaching, his gait still slightly uneven from his injuries but growing stronger every day. He'd been out at the ranch, making final preparations for their new life together. "Evening, ladies," he said, touching his hat.
"Belle, might I borrow my bride for a walk?"
"She's all yours," Belle said with a wink. "Well, tomorrow she will be." As they walked down Main Street, Clara noticed how natural it felt to match her stride to his, how right her hand felt in his. They passed the Mercantile, where Jake Morrison now treated her with exaggerated respect, the hotel where she took her weekly meals, the church where tomorrow Reverend Hartley would speak the words that bound them together. "Nervous?" Lucas asked as they reached the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open land.
"No," Clara said, then laughed. "Yes, not about marrying you, but about everything changing."
"Not everything." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "You'll still be the woman who faced down Prescott, who saved my life, who fights for what's right even when it's hard. I'll be Clara Granger. A name doesn't change who you are." He touched her face gently. "Any more than that dress tomorrow will make you more beautiful than you are right now, with dust on your boots and ink on your fingers." Clara leaned into his touch.
"When did you become so poetic?"
"Must be all that time lying around while a certain seamstress read to me." His expression grew serious. "Clara, I need you to know something. Tomorrow, when I promise to honor you, I mean it in every way. Your work, your dreams, your friendships, they're all part of who you are. I'd never ask you to give them up." "I know." And she did. In all their planning, the house they'd build with room for her expanded shop, the schedule that would let Lucas manage the ranch while she ran her business, the future they'd mapped out together, never once had he suggested she should be less than she was. Good. He pulled her close, and Clara rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Because I have a feeling you're just getting started. Ember Hollow doesn't know what's coming. They stood there as the last light faded. Two people on the edge of a new beginning. Behind them, the town settled into evening lamps being lit, families gathering, the eternal rhythms of community life. Before them stretched the open land, vast and full of possibility. We should head back, Lucas said eventually. Martha Hendricks threatened to lock me in the livery if I kept you out too late the night before the wedding. Clara laughed. She would too. As they walked back, they passed the spot where months ago, Clara had confronted the drunk who was bothering Belle, the place where Lucas had first called her brave. So much had changed since then. Yet the core remained the same two people who saw each other clearly and chose to stand together anyway. At her shop door, Lucas paused. After tomorrow, this won't be goodbye at evening anymore. No, Clara agreed. After tomorrow, it's home we're going to, together. He kissed her then, sweet and full of promise, before stepping back. Until tomorrow, Miss Thornton. Until tomorrow, Mr. Granger. Clara watched him walk away, then turned to find half the town pretending not to have been watching. She waved, earning waves and smiles in return, then went inside. Her shop was transformed. Belle and the other women had decorated for tomorrow's wedding breakfast. Garlands of wildflowers and white ribbon turning the practical space into something magical. In the back room, her wedding dress weighted ivory silk that caught the light like moonbeams, every stitch placed with love and hope. A knock at the back door surprised her. Eleanor Hartley entered, carrying a small wrapped box. I know it's late, Eleanor said, but I wanted to give you this privately. Clara opened the box to find a delicate hair comb, pearls and silver wrought into the shape of flowering vines. Eleanor, it's beautiful. It was my mother's. She wore it at her wedding, as did I. I thought, well, you've become like a daughter to me these past months. I'd be honored if you'd wear it tomorrow. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I'm the one who's honored. Eleanor embraced her, this woman who'd taken the first risk in accepting her. You've changed this town, Clara, shown us that strength comes in many forms, that tradition and progress can dance together like partners at a social. Whatever comes next, know that you have family here, real family. After Eleanor left, Clara sat in her shop, surrounded by the life she'd built. Tomorrow would bring vows and celebration, the formal joining of two lives already intertwined. But tonight was for gratitude for the aunt who'd left her a chance, for the friends who'd stood by her, for the man who saw her truly, for the town that had tested her and ultimately embraced her. A year ago, she'd been alone in Denver, talented but adrift. Now she was Clara May Thornton, soon to be Clara Granger seamstress, businesswoman, friend, lover, and proud member of a community that valued grit over guilt. The clock chimed midnight, technically making it her wedding day. Clara smiled, standing to prepare for bed. In the morning, Belle would help her dress. Eleanor would fix her hair with the precious comb. Sarah Paulson had promised to sing. Even Tom had a role, proudly guarding the ring Lucas would place on her finger. But first, one last look at her town. Clara stepped onto the porch, breathing in the night air. Ember Hollow slept peacefully, unaware that come morning, it would witness not just a wedding, but a promise that two people who'd found each other against all odds would continue building something extraordinary together. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called, wild and free. Clara smiled, understanding the feeling. Tomorrow she'd bind herself to Lucas, to this place, to a future bright with possibility. But like that coyote, she'd remain essentially herself, wild at heart, free in spirit, choosing her path with eyes wide open. Sleep like you're worth the world, she whispered to herself, remembering Lucas's words from so long ago, because tomorrow she'd wake to prove that she was... The wind picked up, setting the shop sign creaking, carrying the scent of sage and coming rain. Clara breathed it in, then went inside to sleep one last time as a Thornton, ready to wake as a Granger, ready for whatever adventures awaited in the vast, promising expanse of tomorrow. In the distance, thunder rolled across the mountains, not threatening but promising rain to nurture the earth, lightning to illuminate the sky, the eternal dance of elements that shape this hard, beautiful land, just like the dance she and Lucas would share tomorrow, and all the tomorrows after that, as far as the horizon and beyond. The shop door closed softly, and Ember Hollow dreamed on, waiting for dawn and the celebration of two hearts finding home in each other, against all odds, beneath the endless western sky. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope Clara and Lucas's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine while sharing it. Where are you listening from? Please share in the comments below. I'd love to know where in the world these frontier tales are reaching. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 for more authentic tales of courage, love, and adventure from the American frontier. If you enjoyed Clara's story, please hit that like button and consider pressing the hype button to help more listeners discover these heartfelt stories from the Old West. Until next time, partners.